Hello, everyone. Welcome to the stay-at-home lecture for tonight. We have a few people coming in, so I'm just going to admit them, and then we'll get started. Appreciate everyone being here tonight. I think we have a really good presentation tonight. Just a few introductory remarks, as I usually do. Tonight's lecture and this lecture series is sponsored by the Society for the History of Medicine and the Health Professions, which is the support organization for the Historical Research Center. The Historical Research Center is the archives unit at UAMS. We are the only archives in the state that's dedicated to preserving the history of the health sciences in Arkansas. And we do that in a number of ways through the collection of archival materials such as photographs, letters, newspapers clippings, and artifacts. We have a great collection of artifacts. And as soon as we're able to host visitors again to the Historical Research Center on campus, I'd love for y'all to come down and we'll give you a tour of our facility. We also install exhibits around campus. We have an exhibit going on right now in the old hospital. It's now called the Central Building. It's about, the theme is toys with a health sciences emphasis. So think of your old Operation Game and other toys like that, Dr. Barbie, and things like that, that you might have played with when you were a child, and how that might have influenced you in becoming a doctor or health professional. The society does, we love to have you a member. If you're not a member, the dues are pretty inexpensive. $5 for if you're a student, $15 for an individual, and that membership fee helps us pay for many of the programming, much of the programming that we do throughout the year. Of course, this is, we do this online, so we don't have a whole lot of overhead with this, but we also have a yearly dinner and lecture. We had to cancel for this year, unfortunately, because of COVID-19, but we're hoping that we can have it start back up again next year. And speaking of our presentations for the stay-at-home lectures, just a note that we are beginning the new year with a full schedule. The next stay-at-home lecture will be January 7th next year, and we're going to begin the year talking about the 1918 influenza, this time in Northwest Arkansas. J.B. Hogan, local historian up in Fayetteville, will be walking us through how Northwest Arkansas dealt with the 1918 flu epidemic. The link that you use to get in tonight will be the same for future lectures. So anything, you don't even have to remember the link. Just save the link that you used it to get in tonight, and you'll be able to get into all future lectures with that link. I also want to make you aware of another lecture that the Society is sponsoring. It's not part of our stay-at-home lecture series, but it is sponsored by the Society. This is going to be a book lecture by Dr. Elliot Bowen, and talking about his new book, In Search of Sexual Health, Diagnosing and Treating Syphilis in Hot Springs, 1890 to 1940, which was just published by Johns Hopkins University Press. So we're glad to have him. Glad to welcome him next week for this presentation. You do need to register for that event. The link is on your screen. It's a long link to remember. I realize that. So if you want to just email me, my email is on the screen also there. If you want to email me, and I will send you the link on how to register for that. Tonight, I am glad to welcome Charley Penix, local architect here in Little Rock. He's a native of Jonesboro. He actually started out as a political science major, and he realized his true calling was architecture. So he transferred to the Fay Jones School of Architecture and Design at U of A in Fayetteville, and graduated from there, first in his class, and he interned in New York, and then he returned to Arkansas in 1983, coming to work for Cromwell Architects and Engineers. He is now CEO of Cromwell, and he has worked on a number of projects at UAMS, including the Winthrop E. Rockefeller Cancer Institute, the Jackson T. Stevens Spine and Neurosciences Institute, and he's going to talk a little bit about that, and also about how the campus footprint has expanded over the years. So I'm going to stop my screen, and that's going to allow Charlie to start sharing his screen. Hopefully. Okay, Charlie, you need to do the your screen two. Do screen two. Charlie, we can't hear you just yet.
Okay, I've got.
Now we can hear you. We can hear you now.
Okay.
And then
on screen two, I can't find it here. Hold on. I can share, but I can't. There we go. There we go. There we go.
Okay. I'm going to turn off my video and audio and then turn it over to you, Charlie.
Great. We're good?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you everyone for being here. Oops, I messed it up again. Okay. Excuse me for the slow start. It's what you call you can't teach an old architect new tricks when it comes to dealing with technology, I guess. First of all, I want to thank Tim Nutt. He's been really helpful in putting together this program. He's found lots of great pictures I'm going to share with you shortly, and I wanted to thank him for that. I also just wanted to thank UAMS. I've worked on the campus for over 20 years with a lot of great people. Brian Cotton in particular, I've from the beginning, and still working with him today. And I want everyone to know that this is my view of sort of what goes on at UAMS through my experience. And I'm not going to vouch that it's totally historically correct, but it's pretty close, I think. And it's from the perspective of doing the work I've been involved with. There are lots of other architects in this community that have done fabulous work at UAMS, the Polk firm, WD&D, WER, Larry Kirshner. There's several that have done other work, and I'm not covering their work in particular because I don't know as much about it. So just start with that, let you all know that. So UAMS, this is a architect's rendering in 1954. And 1954, I love this because the vision for UAMS began in the year I was born. So essentially everything that is on the UAMS campus has happened in my lifetime, which I think is pretty amazing. I guess that is another way of saying I'm pretty old. The architecture was in the international style. It was a very functional sort of building. It was designed to be, you have to think about at the time, it was going to be out in the park, away from downtown Little Rock, out in War Memorial Park, in not the country, and obviously, but a place in the park, a beacon on the hill in the park. One thing that I find very interesting, and I'm not sure of this, but nothing I have found shows that there was ever anything involved with a design that clarified how the campus would grow. And what I mean by that, in today's healthcare architects, if you were doing a new hospital, there would be considerable thought put into how the hospital would grow in the future. I don't know that those were similar thoughts happened at that time in the 1950s, but I don't think so. And so the growth on the campus over many, many years has been organic, not planned. I think that's both a good and a bad thing. Sometimes very planned growth is boring. And an example of that I would give you is not that it's a boring city, but think of Phoenix, Arizona, or Tulsa, Oklahoma. Plan for growth, very regular gridded streets, very obvious way to grow, the way everything's named. But you can also argue that that's not very interesting. And sometimes things that grow organically, like medieval cities with windy, curvy streets that seem chaotic, are much more interesting. So I think the UAMS campus is a more interesting place, probably because it didn't have totally planned growth in its history. So the architect, who's right here, Edward Durrell Stone, born in Fayetteville, Arkansas. He was he designed the Museum of Modern Art that opened in New York City in 1939. That was probably sort of put him on the map, as you might say. And in this picture, you can see he is standing with President Kennedy looking at a model of the Kennedy Center. This picture is taken 1 month before Kennedy was assassinated. So it's kind of an interesting picture. And there, of course, is the Kennedy Center on the Potomac in Washington, D.C. The style of his architecture has been described as being modern, but very classical with ornamentation. And you can see that in the Kennedy Center. It's a very classical form, even though it's modern architecture. So here is a slide from 1957. This is a pamphlet that was announcing the opening of the new hospital. And there's the entire thing. There's the hospital. That's it. That's looking from the south. I love this picture of the cafeteria. If you look at the furniture in it, and this picture on the upper right corner, that's some of the early furniture in the building. And in that era, a lot of the modern furniture, you can see this Eames chair now, which is on display in the Museum of Modern Art and can be purchased from the Museum of Modern Art today. That's a page from their catalog. And here again is a picture just to point out kind of where you are. Markham is back here at the very top of the slide. This is Elm Street, which is now Jack Stevens Drive. And this is Plateau, the little street that goes across the Cedar at a diagonal. Burger King's back over here. Or yeah, I think that's right. Or Walgreens. This is a slide 2 years later from 1959, where you can see the student dormitory was being built. It's still under construction. I love this picture because you can see through the building. It doesn't have any walls in it yet. You just see the floor slabs and the glass framing, and you can see through the building. I think this was the dining hall. Across, this is what is now Hooper Drive, and across the street is the old state hospital. And not to be derogatory or anything, but it's really kind of looks like something where Jack Nicholson would have hung out, kind of a One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest kind of place. And that's directly across the street. Another really interesting thing about this photo is how undeveloped Little Rock is at that time. You look west of UAMS, and the only thing you see, it just looks like you're out in the Ozarks somewhere. You can see St. Vincent right here, brand new, just going up. Here's a little bit of War Memorial Stadium, but other than that, it's pretty undeveloped west of the campus. So by 1962, they had already added the, let's see here, this is Shorey. So there's the education building. Here's the dormitory. All three components of the current campus are there by 1962. So what I'm talking about is today there are four big entities on campus. There's the hospital, there's research, there's education, but now there's also outpatient clinics, and it's a huge part of the campus, outpatient clinics and procedures. That did not exist in 1962. In 1962, it was basically a small teaching hospital and a charity hospital with a lot of charity patients. This was the old Sheffield Clinic, which now this is where the VA parking lot is, and this is where the VA is now. Across the street, he'd be the Center on Aging. And over in here is Stack Stevens building. So just again, just to give you an idea, no parking deck. So today the parking deck 2 is right here, and you go into the building in this location. By 1970, you can see that the old state hospital has been torn down, and the new just opened state hospital, which at the time was named the Orville Faubus Intensive Treatment and Administrative Center. And again, that's across Hooper. Hooper Drive, I learned just putting this together, was the first dean. Hooper was the first dean of the UAMS College of Medicine back in the 1800s, which I thought that was very interesting. And I'll talk about something later in the lecture, but this street, Hooper, politically, for many, many years, was the dividing line between the state hospital, both state entities, but the state hospital was on the west side of Sheffield, and UAMS was on the east side. By 1977, already Shorey has been outgrown for educational purposes. So now the new library building has been built, which has a lot of classroom facilities as well. And I believe a central plant expansion has taken place. So one thing UAMS, the campus as a whole, all of the chilled water and heating water for the entire campus is made and was made at that time in one central plant in this location. So, and that continues to this day. The plants have grown, but all of the buildings on UAMS are tied into a central hot and cold water system. So by 1985, we've got the VA in the background, and way off here to the south is the ambulatory care center, the outpatient building that still exists today. And you can see the bridge that they had to extend out there to get to it. But it's kind of out there for that time. And you can see that the first phase, the first half of what is now known as parking deck number 2 has been completed. So here we have a diagram. I love these diagrams. It's a kind of a density mass void diagram. And what it shows you is the black area represents buildings, and white is just void where there aren't buildings. So here's the original campus. This one little piece right here, there's Shorey, and there's the hospital, and that's it. And then by 1960, you can see the dormitory. And then you keep going and you get to 2003, and you can see you're in a very different place from that little campus that was built up on the hill and opened in 1959. So Harry Ward is, I'm not talking in this lecture about a lot of individuals on campus because there's so many that have contributed so much over the years, but probably more than anyone else, Harry Ward did the most to transform UAMS from a small medical school with a charity hospital to the academic health center it is today and research leader. The timing was perfect. You have to remember, this is the time when there were a lot of new millionaires in Arkansas. Walmart had, gone public by that time. You had the trucking industries up there, J.B. Hunt, Jones Lines, Tyson's. So there were a lot of new millionaires, and Harry Ward was a genius at courting these people and getting them to invest in the future of UAMS. So we're talking about people like Harvey and Bernice Jones, Pat and Willard Walker, many, many others. The Stevens family here in Little Rock. So that he was a genius at doing that. And that's what really helped transform the campus. This is a picture of him with Chancellor Dodd Wilson at the White House when the Clintons were there. And this is the hospital the first new addition to the hospital that was completed in about 97, I think. And at that time, it was just University Hospital. It was subsequently, at his retirement, I believe, named the Harry Ward Tower. So this is at the point where the campus was truly exploding, and there really wasn't there wasn't a plan that I'm aware of for planned growth. So what happened is these buildings just started popping up wherever they could pop up and tie in the best they could. And they were all built. They were, the leadership on the campus was brilliant because they already knew that real estate that was close to the center of campus had huge value. And so all of these buildings were designed for future expansion. You can see the original Walker Tower. It's only 4 stories, 1, 2, or 5, maybe 4 or 5. You can see Jones I is only 4 stories at this point. This picture was taken after the Walker Tower, the first Arkansas Cancer Research Center, was completed. But the Jones I Tower had not been added on yet. Here is the Reynolds Center on Aging. It also started out as a 4-story building. And then here is the Stevens Spine Institute that I worked on, which started out to be a 6-story building. And you can see these vertebrae that are precast concrete that are supposed to represent the vertebrae of the spine stop at the 6th floor. And that's kind of the only way you have any sort of knowledge that it was originally designed as a 6-story building. And then I just think these are great photos. I love this one with Jones being expanded shortly after the Stevens Spine Institute building was completed. And you can see the Jones Eye here, both as a 4-story or 5-story building and the full 9-story building. So the first project I was involved in as a young architect, I was the project manager for the Stevens Spine Institute. So these are some sketches that Gene Levy designed the building, and these sketches are very interesting, and they're very interesting in the sort of political history of what happened, because this sketch was intended to show to Mr. Stevens along with this picture. So what this sketch showed was, well, if the building's 6 stories tall, this is how it will look from the interstate in relation to the Arkansas Cancer Research Center, to the hospital, to the Center on Aging. And then this was an early, not very high tech. Basically, we colored up an elevation, and then we superimposed it, plugged it into just a photograph. And these were taken to Mr. Stevens to show him what he could see from his office in the Stevens building. And supposedly, I was not there, I wish I had been, supposedly, he said, well, let's just build the whole thing. So that's what they did. It never was a 2-phase project. It started out as 6 stories, but it was immediately a 12-story building, thanks to Mr. Stevens' generosity. So on that project, I'm just explaining the architectural design of it a little bit. It's again, it's intended to be a metaphor for the spine, and these cylinders that you see on the building serve the building the same way the spine serves the body. So the electrical and mechanical chases are these 2 chases on the west side of the building. The vertical circulation, the stairs, are on the east side of the building, and all the elevator core and bathrooms are also on the east side. And what that gives you is an uninterrupted floor plate that is totally flexible and can be laid out in any way you like to lay it out. I worked with 2 wonderful people on this project, Dr. T. Glenn Pate, and it's been 20 years since we worked on that project, but I get to be with him every day in my car, listening to him on public radio, making the health, Here's to Your Health. So I kind of feel like we stay in touch that way. And I also got to work with Dr. Yasser Gill, who is probably the most famous physician ever to work at UAMS. And if you don't know much about Yasser Gill, he is known as the father of modern neurosurgery. And what he did is he invented the use of microscopes in brain surgery. And he was the nicest, kindest man. And he showed me all over his lab and what he wanted. And he explained how the brain was put together by peeling an orange and showing me how the brain is like an orange with segments like an orange. And just a fascinating person, very, very kind. And UAMS was really lucky to have this guy. And I was very fortunate to be able to meet him and work with both he and Dr. Pate. So this is at the building dedication in 2000, early 2003. So another thing about this building that we're very proud of is we were given the charge of getting this building built really fast. Mr. Stevens was in bad health and he wanted to see it complete, and we worked as hard as we could to do that. So from the day we started working on it, which was January in 2001, until the building dedication was just a couple of months, 3 months over 2 years, which for those of you all not in the business, that doesn't sound very fast, but that's incredibly fast for a 12-story building with a lot of different functions in it. And it was very fast. And amazingly, it went pretty smoothly. The top floor was shelled at that time. So the actual building dedication took place in an empty floor. And but at that dedication, it was announced that the Reynolds gift would be where they would finish out the top floor of the auditorium. So that was great. One of the not funny, but interesting things that we did was to make sure we didn't have to have the extra expense of bringing a crane in to get supplies up to the 12th floor after the building opens. So there are elevators, but elevators can only carry certain lengths. I mean, you can't put something more than, you can take out the ceiling of an elevator, but you can't get something more than 9 or 10 feet tall in it. So some of the wall studs, anything that was going to be over the length that would fit in an elevator was brought up in advance while the crane was still there to save money. So we all thought that was so brilliant, but guess what? We forgot one thing, and that was the projection screen. So the projection screen that had to be put in the auditorium here was 20-something feet long. So guess what? They had to get a little crane and lift it up to the top of the building anyway, but we tried. So these are just some pictures of some of the spaces inside the building. This is the bone temporal lab where Dr. Sun works a lot. This was the cadaver lab where med students can learn about working on the human body. This is a swimming pool that's used for a lot of therapy in the bottom level of the facility. And this is part of a waiting room in one of the clinics, I think in the Pate Clinic in the building. So by 2004, I was also fortunate to be able to work on the first real master plan. I think there'd been some minimal stuff before, but the first master plan to sort of figure out how this campus could grow, because it was already apparent that because of the fast growth that had taken place, that there were some real issues about distributing chilled and cold water and how you do all of that with this fast growing campus. So these two slides show you some of the elements that we came up with in the 1984. So already the hospital was under planning. Here's the new hospital. You can see here with parking deck number 1. On this side, the magenta color here, that was supposed to be the expansion to the Arkansas Cancer Research Center, which is now the Rockefeller Cancer Institute. That would have required the tearing down of Barton, which is located right here. So that didn't happen. And I'll show you a little bit about that later. And then this shows kind of the perimeter road. It's really very much like a city. You think about a city that grew and grew and grew. And then finally you build an interstate loop around it so that you can get around the city and serve it from the perimeter rather than everything going into the center of town. It's really kind of the same thing. So the planning, some of the things that are going on today were planned at that time. Over here on the east side, it was planned for the bringing together Cedar, which is located here, and Pine. So as you know, right now, Cedar's a one-way street here. So the plan was to get Cedar out of the campus so that all of this part of the campus wouldn't have a lot of car traffic through it. And that's actually happening today. This is being built today. And Cedar will no longer run one way through the campus as it does today. In this master plan over here, when I was talking earlier about the campus having three components when it started out, it had the hospital, which is now represented in this red color. It has the green, which is the education component. Here's Shorey that started out. Here's the library. Here's the public health. So this was showing future growth of the education component. So the campus is in quadrants, really. If you think of it divided in four like this, you have the hospital in the southwest quadrant. You have the education component in the northwest quadrant. You have all of the research in the northeast quadrant, and you have all of the outpatient and clinical components in the yellow in the southeast, none of which existed when the original hospital opened. And the gray represents parking decks. Orange is support, administrative offices, student housing, central plant expansion. Even at that time, so what was planned was the original plant, which was right here, it was planned to have future growth down in this area and down in here, I believe. Well, actually, in this plan, here's the west plant. You can see the west plant here. And the boiler house maybe is here. Anyway, that's not exactly what happened, but I'll show you that in a minute. This is kind of an interesting diagram, and all it really is, it shows all of the multi-story buildings on campus and how they're all connected. So it shows what floors are connected in what buildings. Just kind of an interesting way to look at the building. Again, color-coded by hospital, education in green, clinics in yellow, and the research in this purpley color. And then again, over here, you see Pine and Cedar coming together as a one-way boulevard. And you see that Hooper has been reconfigured to veer further to the west. And I'll explain that a little later, why I think that happened. These are just some, they now look kind of primitive, but at the time they were high-tech computer modeling 4D studies. So we modeled the whole campus. We actually, I wish I had put a picture of it. There's a model of this built out of balsa wood that's over in some of the physical plant offices and the facilities offices. That's quite interesting. It would be great if it could be updated. And then again, just another view. Here's where the ACRC was supposed to be. But again, it would have meant tearing down Barton, which is right here. Here's the new hospital. And you can see Hooper veering off in this direction. So now it's 2006. This dormitory, which is now about 45 years old, is blown up, imploded to build a new hospital. You can see the recently completed Ward Tower here and this building coming down. The building probably came down because housing demands were just different. By 2006, there weren't very many med students that wanted to live in a dormitory with a bathroom down the hall. That just didn't cut it anymore. So I think it was a pretty easy decision to tear this down and either rely on the private sector to provide housing, But they did build, there is some newer housing up near Markham for students that's more like an apartment for today's living. So these are some pictures of that explosion that I was talking about that took place. These were the completed, here's the Ward Tower, here's the new hospital, and the Psychiatric Research Institute. Both of these were Polk projects. Here's the Spine Institute. And over here, you can see the expansion to the Arkansas Cancer Research Center, all of this now known as the Winthrop Rockefeller Cancer Institute. This construction is underway. This is the College of Public Health that was completed sometime in this time frame also. And then here's an image of the completed Don Ray Center for Aging, excuse me, Reynolds Center on Aging with all of the floors. So these are three individuals that we worked with on the Cancer Research Institute, and I really wanted to point them out because the Cancer Institute would not exist today had these three people not, UAMS not been fortunate enough to have these three people on its faculty. So these two were really the founders. This is Dr. Kent Westbrook, and this is Dr. James Sun, both still there. Great guys that really founded the Arkansas Cancer Research Institute. The first 4 floors, the addition, and then the final big addition of the Cancer Institute on the north side. And this is Bart Barlegi. So Bart Barlegi was an amazing man who really was the world's leading expert on the treatment of multiple myeloma. And to this day, people come from all over the world to be treated at UAMS for multiple myeloma. Barlegi is quite a character, and this is his Ducati motorcycle that he liked to ride around at high speed. UAMS people didn't like that very much, as you might imagine. They're afraid he'd get killed, but he's a daring kind of man. And it's been explained to me that the kind of research he did and what he accomplished, that it takes a daring person to do that, that kind of a lot of times those kind of people are daring personalities. And so he is that kind of person. He's a very aggressive person, and he did fabulous work in multiple myeloma, a real risk taker. So in the beginning, on the left here is the site of the building, which was a really complicated site, which made it very challenging, but a lot more interesting. You know, it's much easier, I guess, to design a building out on a real clean site with nothing you have to work with, a big flat site, but it's also not very challenging. This building, which is located today right in here, the expansion, you can see it over on this side. It literally ties into 5 existing buildings. So it ties into the outpatient facility, the ambulatory care center. It tied in, obviously, to the existing Arkansas Cancer Research Center. It tied into the freestanding MRI facility. It tied into the existing, my mouse is locked up. My mouse quit working. Use what? Oh, that won't work. Yeah, there we go. Tied into parking deck number 3. And so it tied into the bridge that runs here. So here we are. Here is the first floor plan of the completed building. And the purpley color here is the expansion. Here's the drop-off drive, which is underneath the building that ties into the parking deck. And then this is a new entry into the MRI building. So you don't realize now that the MRI building is a separate building. It just feels like it's part of the Cancer Institute as far as getting in and out of the building. This is a diagram that kind of explains how the building is organized. On the far right here is the existing Walker Tower. The yellow is the elevator, new elevator core and waiting room area. And then on the left is the addition. And this is what's called a stacking diagram. So it shows what is supposed to be on every floor. And here's the existing MRI building. So when this building, again, like many other times on campus, there was a discussion about, do we build less floors, add in the future? How do we get the most bang for the buck? And the very difficult decision was made. The choice was, we can build an 8-story building and finish out every single floor, or we can build a 12-story building and finish out 3 to 4 floors and have 8 floors left for expansion. That was a hard decision because they wanted all 8 floors filled out immediately. But in hindsight, looking 10 years down the road, it's been 10 years since this building's opened, and in a few weeks, every single floor of the building will be complete. There's no more room to expand. So that was a very wise decision. These images show you this was an original concept drawing that Dr. Sun and Dr. Westbrook and others took around to gather support. This is really a marketing image to gather support for the building. And Dr. Sun wanted a really large vertical, something you could really see this building. So that was an image at the time. Down here is what the result is. This is the real building. This is actually a computer rendering. This is not a picture, a real picture. Again, it's a computer rendering superimposed into a photo, but it's pretty accurate to what it looks like today. And then this, I love this diagram over here. It's really simple, but it explains how the building works. So the red is the existing Walker Tower. The orange color is the elevator core. The green are the waiting rooms between the clinics, and the blue is the expansion. And just showing you some of the spaces in the building. These are some research spaces. This is the infusion clinic. It looks pretty cold because I think this is during the punch. It didn't have the curtains up, anything. It's a very Spartan picture. This is the waiting area, one of the waiting areas. I think this is on the 4th floor in the infusion floor. Again, for wayfinding, what we did is this is very open and very filled with light. You can see the stairway. The concept of the building was, unlike anywhere else on campus, patients that come to the Cancer Institute spend a lot of time here, days, full days upon days, having infusion and other treatments. And so it was really important that they had a nice environment, an uplifting environment to hang out in. That's not really true of other facilities. You think about an outpatient facility, you go in, you get your thing, you're done, you go home. But this facility in particular really needed some uplifting spaces for patients and their families that were going through a really, really difficult time. The elevator core, we for the entire 12 floors is faced with stone. And that's meant as a wayfinding thing so that you kind of get a sense of no matter where you are, when you come into this big open space and you see the slate, you know that's the elevators. Some other great spaces. Very few people on campus probably even know about this space. It's a wonderful little, it's called the Healing Garden. It's right out through these doors. You go up these stairs and the MRI is over here on the right. And then this little Healing Garden, particularly go out there next summer because some of the exhaust air from these buildings blows out there and it's cool air. So you can go out there in the summer when it's 100 degrees, and it's like 80 out there because the cold air is blowing out. Great space to have lunch or something. This is the MERT, the multiple myeloma clinic on the 8th floor. And this is in the lobby. There's this wonderful piano. And one of the great things that's happened since this building opened is there are often people playing this piano. And amazingly, out of the 10,000 people that work at UAMS, there are a lot of really great pianists out there. And they love to play the piano there. And the sound goes up through that 12-story atrium. And it's wonderful. And everyone loves it. And that was a kind of a nice surprise that we didn't really plan, but it worked out great. So this is some wayfinding work that went on. We didn't do it, but we were sort of involved in it at the time. And the campus had gotten so complicated, it needed some sort of organization for, patients coming to campus. How do you figure out where the heck you are, So the parking decks had all kinds of names. This one up here is people called it the Markham Street deck or the whatever deck. This one, I don't know what they were going to call it, the new hospital deck. Oops. This is the parking 3. So basically, to simplify how you find your way around on campus, the idea is that you only have to know 2 things. There's 3 places to park: parking 1, parking 2, and parking 3. And the only other thing you need to know is you need to know which elevator core you need to get to, because they're all designated by letters. So every elevator core on campus has a different set of letters. So the ones in the Cancer Institute are D, and the ones in the outpatient center are E, and the one, so that should help you figure out where you need to go. And then there's a circular path that goes through from the first floor of the main hospital. Because of topography, it ends up on the 4th floor of the Cancer Institute in the outpatient center. And that loop, if you follow the circles that are clearly marked in the floor and on the ceilings, if you follow those circles, you can get anywhere on campus. That circular route now goes through the parking deck and over to the Spine Institute, and it now also extends down to the Center on Aging down in this area. It just doesn't show on this map. And here's just another wayfinding map tool. These are pamphlets you can get at UAMS to help you show your way around or get online. So this is the most recent master plan that has just been produced, and will guide the growth of the campus in the future. I love this image for lots of reasons. One, you look how huge the campus is, and that little area that's designated with the L there in the middle, that's the original campus. That little bitty red thing in the middle, and everything else is new. So, excuse me again. There are 3 current projects that I'll talk a little bit about that are going on right now, but you can see again, you can see this road that veers off this direction. You can see right here is the new central plant that's going up right now. You can see it at the corner of Cedar and Plateau. This is going to be the new radical oncology building, and it's about to begin construction. And this will be the surgical annex that that I'm working on, that the Cromwell firm's working on right now, and I'll show you a little bit of that. One thing I wanted to point out, I was talking about earlier, is this Hooper Drive originally divided the state hospital on the west from UAMS on the east. When the new hospital was built, for the first time in history, psychiatric patients were brought onto campus. And that was a really big deal, and a very, proper thing to do, that mental health had been stigmatized as, it had to be on the other side of Hooper. I think, excuse me, I don't know why this is doing this. I think that the PRI's location, where it is here would technically in the old days be on the west side of Hooper. So maybe somehow that kept psychiatric care on the west side of Hooper. But that's my speculation. I don't know if that's true or not, but I think it makes an interesting story. So, excuse these photos. I did this on a rainy Sunday a few days ago. But if you can, this is the new central energy plant going up on the northeast part of campus. Big tilt-up concrete job. It's fascinating. There was like nothing there. And then some of you may have noticed instantly there was a building. So it's been fun watching that. This is the power plants and the central loop stuff. It's a big story, and I'm not the one to talk about it because I'm not an engineer, but it's really a wonderful thing UAMS has done, which provides energy for the campus at really low rates. So these power plants will pay for themselves over several years. And the way they will pay for themselves is because UAMS has the capacity to generate, because they have to have generation. You have to be able to generate electricity to run hospitals, obviously, during emergencies when the power's off. And UAMS has such a huge capacity for this that in the summer, when it's really hot and there's a huge demand on power, UAMS can kick in and help produce power for the power grid. And the ability to do that means that UAMS is offered the lowest power rate. So UAMS gets to buy electricity at really cheap rates. And you can imagine how much electricity UAMS uses. So the ability to buy power at cheap rates is a wonderful thing long term. It's very renewable. It's sustainable, I mean, and it's and it pays for itself. So what could be better than that? This is, you can see the pine cedar work going on now. This is pine, one way north, and here's where the other side will be, cedar, which will run to the south. This is this is a picture I took of the Radonc Center. It's on a sign. It's actually been moved across the street from where it showed on the master plan. You need to understand too, master plans are meant to guide development. They're not meant to be absolute. You have to do this. It's meant to be kind of a plan to give you guidance on how to grow. I think what was decided is for Radonc to tie into the Cancer Institute and the rest of the campus, it would be easier to build a bridge across to the existing parking deck 3 than on the site across the street to the south. This is a WD&D project. So again, back to the, this is a 3D view of the 2029 master plan. And here's where the Radonc originally was supposed to go. Now it's going to be in this location right here. The the surgical annex was going to go in this, was planned to be in either this location or in this location right here. And it's now going to be in this location for a variety of reasons. I think what this shows that I think is very interesting is that what started out in 1957 to be a little campus out in the park on the west side of town is now the most urban place in the state of Arkansas. If there's anything close to Manhattan in Arkansas, it's the UAMS campus. And it employs 10,000 people. You know, that's like the size of the entire population of Batesville or Malvern or Arkadelphia. That's how many employees work for UAMS, the largest public employer in the state. Huge economic boom to the city of Little Rock. I mean, it's wonderful for this city to have that. So now in the surgical annex, here's a view sort of from sort of the up in the air, like if you're in a helicopter hovering over the interstate. And it shows you where the original site was going to be, and it got moved to this location for a variety of reasons. Generally, the reasons have to do with cost, and that was part of it. It was the original site was going to require parking decks, which are very expensive. And as we say in the industry, parking decks are non-revenue producing space. So, it's hard to justify building parking decks, which is why there's a shortage of them on campus today. So the site to the south provided a much better opportunity for parking and some other things, and could get more bang for the buck, I guess. So here is the site layout. Just to get you oriented, here's the VA. This is 7th Street here. Hooper Drive comes down and ends at 7th here. Sort of the controlling factors for the site are there's a rule in Medicare, Medicaid, something that if an entity is going to bill for services on UAMS billing, then the front door to the building has to be within 750 feet of the main campus. So this little radius here shows that it is within 750 feet of the campus. Another competing restriction on the site, see this big water line? That's like 2 30-inch diameter lines. So obviously we could not build on top of those. We did not want to touch those. So we had to avoid those. We had to design the site so that in the future, if Hooper ever were to be extended, there was a time when, when there was a plan for Hooper to extend and tie into a new overpass over I-630. So we had to design the site so that could still happen. It could be built through what's now the parking, and a parking deck could be placed somewhere else in the future. Maybe, that was the idea, that it at least met the requirements of you could extend Hooper, although I don't think many of us think that will ever happen now. So the building, the way the massing of it is lends itself to an interesting building form. And I'll start out and show you, this is a view from the southwest. So here's 7th Street here coming along. So you will enter, the car will drive up here, and this is a long covered drop off. And here's the entry, and you will be able to turn around and leave, or you'll be able to go into the parking. Here's sort of looking at it from the other side, coming in from 7th, again, a long covered drop-off area. What that's really for is if you go look at the hospital around 3 or 4 in the afternoon and look at the cars lined up to pick up patients who have been outpatient patients being released. There's a real need to have a lot of coverage. So we can cover 4 or 5 cars simultaneously without people getting wet. So most buildings, for efficiency reasons, are pretty boxy because all of the floor plates are the same size. All of them are, say, 25,000 square feet. The program on this building, we were very fortunate because the program didn't work out that way. The program wanted nearly 50,000 square feet on each of the first 2 floors and only about 25,000 feet on the upper 2 floors. So it lent itself to a more interesting building form because it's not just a box. It's more interesting. So the bottom 2 floors are clinics and surgery, and the upper 2 floors are patient rooms and administrative offices and clinical space and a pain clinic. The form of the building, it's meant to read. You're supposed to be able to figure out the building just by looking at it. So again, this very strong entry form here. The south part faces the cars, the interstate. So that marks your entry for coming in by car. And the north side marks its face to the campus, your entry if you are walking over from campus, which would be this entry right here. The mechanical systems, excuse me, again, I'm having to use my touch mouse because my mouse quit working. This gray form is the mechanical systems. And so all of the mechanical air handler systems are in a penthouse on the roof, and they run to shafts on the side of the building, and that'll be expressed in the architecture. So you see this gray form, you'll be able to see on both sides of the building, this is the mechanical. So mechanical units up here and the shafts that take the air down to the floors here. And this is the entry element. These green roof spaces are for some physical therapy space outside and for some healing garden areas for the patients. Here's some elevations that is showing where you could have signage for donors. We tried to be a little humorous, trying to be a little humorous here, showing where somebody could give money if they want to. And obviously the UAMS logo, which will be, this will be visible from 630 heading west. And this one will be visible when you come 7th Street from the west, from War Memorial or from Hooper, you'll see that image. And then these are the floor plans. This is the first floor. Again, you can see this through lobby with the entrance from the campus to the north, the entrance from the patients arriving from the south. This is, you don't see the drop off here, but there's a drop off that's covered all along here. Clinic space. All of this is imaging. Imaging has to be on the first floor because the imaging equipment is very, very heavy. So you don't want to support it on an upper floor. And when you replace equipment, it's hard to get it up to an upper floor. Oops, excuse me again. And then here's, sorry, here's the patient floor. So you can see the patient rooms. This is a physical therapy area for these patients with some outside area. And here's outside healing gardens on the roof. And then this is the surgery floor. You can see it had to be it's the largest floor in the building. These white squares are ORs. There's 12 ORs. There are 4 ORs that can grow in the future to make it 16 ORs. All of this turquoise area is where the patients prep and recover. This is sort of the waiting area for the patients here. And then the 4th floor is the pain treatment area. This is administrative. This is for students. So part of the purpose of this building is to attract good residents. So say you're an orthopedic residency student and you go turn around the country wondering where you want to do your orthopedic residency, this facility will provide some really great space and make it very attractive, along with a great program for orthopedic residency. So it's again, it's kind of a marketing thing. It helps get students if you have nice space, and faculty if you have nice workspace, same thing. And these are a couple of final images. You can see up here in the upper left is the covered drop-off area. Oh, I'm going way over. I'm so sorry. And oops. And then there's the view from the campus to the south. And I will quit because I have gone over time. I wanted to, any architects out there that might be watching, we can't promise because we haven't gotten approved yet, but if you will email me your name and membership number, if we get approved, you can get an hour's credit for putting up with me tonight. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Charlie. Appreciate it. Let's see if we have any questions. If you have any questions, please type them into the chat box, and Charlie will answer them. We do have a comment or a question when you're talking about the surgical annex.
Yes.
Someone, one of the viewers asked if she's assuming that UAMS is working with the VA in, I guess, where it was located and yes,
absolutely. So there's actually, let's see if I go back. Well, it's not on the screen now. There's a little piece on the corner. There's a place where there's a little there's an acre of land that the VA controls right at the corner of the entry of the building, and the campus is working with the VA about all of those issues, obviously. But yes, is the answer to the question.
And then we have another question about which UAMS project are you the most proud of?
Well, then Because it's finished and because it's the largest project I worked on and because I think it's a wonderful building, the Cancer Institute, for sure, to this point. But it's finished. So this one is just in its infancy, and I love this project. It's a very exciting project, and it's this one may be equally or may surpass the Cancer Institute. Who knows? They're all my favorites. They've all been wonderful and just different experiences. And I've grown as an architect. I mean, it's working at UAMS has been, well, let's put it this way. It's been the greatest experience of my career working with UAMS and on the projects at UAMS.
We have another question. It says, does UAMS have an internal office or division that helps to curate the overall look of campus?
Not really, not that I'm aware of. And again, I do know this. We were asked not to use any of that orange brick on this building, and we were pleased to oblige. So, again, it's kind of like the difference between a campus like Harvard, where all the buildings look alike. They're all classically designed, whatever. Maybe not Harvard. I'm trying to think of a campus that all the buildings look the same as far as their style. Say maybe Hendrix. Or a campus like the University of Arkansas at Fayetteville, which there's not really a campus style. There's a lot of different kinds of buildings. So there's two ways to look at it. One is, oh, these buildings don't match. They don't go together, blah, blah, blah. Why didn't they make this campus all look alike? And the other is, this campus is much more interesting because it has a lot of different kinds of buildings and it shows the history of the development of architecture, blah, blah, blah. I individually, I'm not saying this is right, I tend to be on the side of variety and not having a campus style. But that's just me.
We have another question. It says, besides Dr. Ward, who were the most influential UAMS administrators for the growth of UAMS?
Somebody else had to answer that question. There were lots and lots of people, I'm sure. Lots. I just know I'm familiar with him because I was around when he was around doing it, and I watched him do it. It was an amazing thing. He was always marketing UAMS, always, no matter what the occasion. I think he did a great job. But there was, anything like that in my position here. Yeah, I'm the CEO of this company, but I don't do this work. It takes a team to do something. That's anybody that says, I, as an architect, said, I did that building at UAMS, that's nonsense. It takes a big team of architects to produce a building like the Cancer Institute, and it's never one person. And I'm sure in the growth at UAMS and decisions that were made, there were a lot of people that worked for Dr. Ward that helped him do that. But as the leader, I'm pointing him out, but I'm sure there were many, many others.
We have another question about the Barton building. What will the renovation of the Barton building look like?
Now, that's an interesting story. I have my personal opinion about the Barton building. I love the Barton building, and I think a lot of architects love the Barton building. And I'm so glad it wasn't torn down for the Cancer Institute. So the Barton building has a problem that a lot of older buildings has. So it was built as a research building, but the floors were they're not very deep. It's probably 12 feet between the floors. And in today's world, you cannot build a research building that has 12-foot floors. They have to be like 16 feet to accommodate all the mechanical systems and exhaust and, all of that kind of stuff takes space. And so it's not really usable for research anymore. And so, it is, but it's not ideal. Let's put it that way. But it would make great office space, and it's very central to campus. And if you tore it down, you could never replace it with another building because the building by today's standards is very inefficient. You couldn't squeeze a building in of that dimension it would be so small, it wouldn't be, you'd never replace it. If you tore it down, it would just be gone and there would never be another building there. So hopefully it will be saved, in my opinion, and it would make great office space or something because it's so central to everything.
We have a comment who says, it says, my dad, this is from Wesley Walls, my dad, who worked for UAMS for more than 35 years, had an office in Barton Research, lots of history. And though it's outdated, the building has great bones.
Yep, totally agree. Wesley is totally right. Right on, Wesley. It's a great building. Yeah. But I know a lot of people at UAMS hate the building, but architects like it a lot.
We have a couple more questions, Charlie. Can you say a little bit, about the development of design in medical facilities? Do most recent facilities seem to be open or less closed off? And how do you imagine that sensibility changing in years to come?
Well, the sensibility that I keep seeing, and the pandemic's just pointed it out more, is as much as possible, you have to design for flexibility. So, we're doing a lot of things like not even building permanent walls anymore, making everything flexible, even the moving of walls. Now, because of COVID, there's a lot of need to make more rooms that have negative air pressure. So before the COVID thing, the hospital regulations only required there to be like 1 or 2 rooms on every patient floor that had negative air for people that had, diseases. So you don't want the germs to get out. You had 1 or 2 rooms for that. Well, now the design standard may be you need to have every room able to have negative airflow. So there's some issues like that we've learned. And then a lot of things are going outpatient. That's the big trend. So the patients spending the night in the hospital, that kind of thing, that's more and more going away. And I think telemedicine is really on the rise. I know that because of COVID, I think a lot of things during hard times, wars, pandemics, whatever, a lot of advances get made. And so I think the advancement that's going to come out of this one is flexibility. You don't always have to go to the hospital or to the doctor's office. You can do a lot of stuff by telemedicine. So, you don't have to drive in from, 100 miles away to go see the doctor necessarily. You could do it from home. So, accommodating the patient. The other thing is it's a big deal for UAMS is it's complicated. So the mantra of UAMS is patient, 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 patient first, because it's hard. It's hard to navigate that campus. And particularly if you think about someone showing up there from a little town in Arkansas, they're scared to death anyway, because something's wrong with them. And, and then they have to figure out how to negotiate this campus. Most of them have never parked in a parking deck. So making it patient friendly, and some of making it patient friendly is getting stuff off of campus. So I think there may be a trend. In fact, it's actually happening in the orthopedic part of UAMS. Their clinics are off campus. And they really, other than one clinic in this new building, they intend to keep the clinics off campus. Why? Well, orthopedic patients are hobbling around, number one. So you can imagine coming to UAMS and parking in a parking deck and trying to get to your doctor appointment with crutches and whatever. But you can be out somewhere in a strip shopping center out in town somewhere, and you can drive up and park at the front door and go in. So I think only the things that have to be on campus in the future will be on campus. And I think there's a trend towards getting things that don't have to be on campus off of campus. And that includes administrative space. The space that is really valuable on that campus, it's valuable for research and hospital and whatever. And administrative space is important, but it doesn't have to be in the middle of campus. It can be on the edge or somewhere else.
I don't think we have any more questions, but we do have a comment. Thanks for sharing, Charlie. Very enjoyable, wonderful photos. And Jonathan Reed said he was glad that he was able to make tonight's talk. So thank you very much for your presentation tonight.
Well, thank you for asking me to do it. And thank you for all your help.
Oh, you're welcome. You're welcome. If we don't have any more questions, we will say good night. And then I hope to see you next week for the Dr. Bowen's book on the treatment of syphilis and hot springs. Again, if you want to email me, I can send you the invite for that. And then the next stay-at-home lecture is January 7th on the 1918 flu in Northwest Arkansas. So everyone stay safe, and we will see you next time. Good night.
Good night.